What's up everyone and welcome back to the MMA Zone. Today, let's get started with Daniel Cormier saying it's better if Khamzat fights Belal Muhammad next. Daniel Cormier is playing matchmaker this week and he makes some good points. DC, a former champ turned UFC color commentator turned pundit, was on his DC and RC show this week to discuss a litany of things. But when the topic got to the welterweight division and what the UFC should do there, Cormier didn't hold back. With welterweight champion Kamaru Usman set to defend his title against Leon Edwards in August, the UFC is looking at who could be the next potential contender for the title after that, assuming Usman wins, of course. Colby Covington already fought Usman twice, and he's not likely to challenge again, at least not for a little while unless he makes a big case for himself. That leaves the potential for Khamzat Chimaev, who is number 3 in the division, behind Colby and Edwards. Cormier believes Khamzat fighting Colby is too much too soon, because if Colby wins and Usman wins, the UFC wouldn't want to put a trilogy fight together, at least not yet. For Cormier, the only thing that makes sense is to pit Belal Muhammad versus Chimaev, and what better place to do that than in Abu Dhabi? This is what Cormier stated and how he made his case.
What I believe Khamzat should do, because the UFC should push this because the UFC needs him and Islam, those guys to fight in Abu Dhabi, I think you put Khamzat versus Belal Muhammad. Belal Muhammad has a style that at times can be a bit less than entertaining. By putting him in there with a guy like Khamzat, it almost guarantees that he has to fight.
Cormier believes that Khamzat would force Muhammad to scrap in the cage and put in a performance that would be entertaining as hell. Khamzat beat Gilbert Burns earlier this year by decision, and while Burns is still an incredible fighter, this does set him back a bit in terms of title shot contention. We're talking about the Brazilian here. With Muhammad, he recently beat Vicente Luque and is still on an 8-fight unbeaten streak, 7 wins, 1 no contest. What do you think about Cormier's suggestion of Khamzat versus Belal at Abu Dhabi, possibly in October? Islam Makhachev gives Demian Maia some betting advice. It seems everyone is talking about the potential for a Charles Oliveira-Islam Makhachev fight for the lightweight title. Oliveira is currently the #1 contender for that title, after being stripped of the belt for missing weight by half a pound at UFC 274 back in May. He beat Justin Gaethje to earn the right to fight for that title, but an opponent has yet to be decided. Some are putting Makhachev's name in the mix here, given that Islam is on a 10-fight win streak to Charles's 11-fight win streak. Islam is also number 4 in the 155-pound division, the highest ranked fighter Oliveira has yet to face after Gaethje and Poirier. That's why, in a recent interview with the Portuguese language podcast, former middleweight and welterweight title contender Demian Maia was asked about what would happen in a hypothetical fight between Oliveira and Makhachev, and he believes that Oliveira has the upper hand here. Case in point, this is what Maia said in the interview this week on Trocação Franca. You have to have a good guard to beat someone like Islam Makhachev, enough guard to at least survive, but at least be offensive, to be dangerous there. Charles Oliveira has that. Charles is a dangerous fight for that type of fighter, not to mention, he's dangerous as hell on the feet. I would put my money on Oliveira. I'm not a betting guy, but I would. Well, in a tweet response to these comments, this is what Islam Makhachev stated. I remember the guy who bet his house and lost in my fight versus Hooker. Don't do the same mistake, Demian Maia. Save your money. This matchup is intriguing. Stylistically, Makhachev's dominant wrestling versus Oliveira's incredible submission game will be one for the ages. Also, there's the specter of Khabib Nurmagomedov, who is the mentor and former training partner of Islam, and he has a very similar style to Islam, so it'd be interesting to see how Oliveira's jiu-jitsu would do against Islam's wrestling. What do you make of Maia's comments here? And what do you think about Islam's response? Don't forget to take a second to hit that like button and subscribe to the MMA Zone to stay up to date on all of the latest fight news. Kevin Holland saying he'd accept a fight against either Diaz brother and would smoke them. Kevin Holland is volunteering his services to fight Nate Diaz, who is on the last fight of his contract. Diaz has been pushing to get his last bout over and done with so he could move on and make seemingly more money outside of the promotion for a scrap. He's likely already got a boxing match lined up against Jake Paul once he is released from the promotion, but that's just speculation at this point. He did say he was going to retire, but who knows. Either way, Holland, who has been impressive in back-to-back wins since returning to the welterweight division, he's saying that if either of the Diaz brothers want to meet him in the octagon, he will kindly oblige. This is what Holland stated about that in a recent interview with MMA Fighting.
Big brother, little brother, doesn't matter. I mean, either Diaz brother, I'd smoke. I think Nate's a better fighter than Nick, but, you know, either way, I'd smoke. You know what I mean? they're over the hill. You know what I mean? Let's be real about it. They're both fun fights. They're over the hill. I mean, Nate did good against Leon, but I mean, Leon has a butter chin.
Holland is coming off a submission victory over Tim Means last week at UFC Austin, when he slapped on a slick Darce choke. Meanwhile, Nate Diaz hasn't fought since mid-2021 when he lost to Leon Edwards, though he rocked Edwards in the last round. And Nick Diaz stepped in against Robbie Lawler last September in his first fight in 6 years, and he didn't look like his old self, basically tapping out of the fight in the third round. What do you make of Holland's comments here? Dan Hardy is not a fan of Dana White disrespecting Nate Diaz. Former UFC fighter turned MMA pundit Dan Hardy has had his fair share of problems with the UFC over the years. In a recent interview with Submission Radio, he talked about the fighter pay issue, how a lot of these athletes should be getting paid more of their fair share of the revenue generated by people wanting to watch them fight. In so doing, he mentioned Nate Diaz. Now, Diaz has been a thorn on the side of the UFC for about a half year or so, calling out the organization for an apparent lack of respect in terms of what they do. Diaz is on the last fight of his current UFC contract and has been publicly angling to fight a list of guys from Dustin Poirier to Khamzat Chimaev. Everything has fallen through though. The thinking from the media and fans is that the UFC is holding on to the potential of making a Nate Diaz versus Conor McGregor fight whenever the Irishman returns to action later this year. But Diaz has been very vocal about leaving the UFC after fighting his last bout, and he even hinted at the idea of boxing Jake Paul to make his money. In an interview this week with the Mac Life, UFC President Dana White stated that this fight would make sense, and he mentioned how Diaz hasn't won many fights over the last 6 years. This is how Hardy responded to White's comments concerning Nate Diaz.
And I saw the thing about him, you know, winning one fight in 5 years and maybe the best person to fight is Jake Paul. It's just unnecessary disrespect. It's one thing when you get fighters disrespecting one another because that's kind of a part of the business. But when the promoter starts shitting on people like that, and someone like Nate Diaz, who's a cool icon, like it just looks bad.
What do you make of Hardy's comments here? Do you agree with him? Let us know in the comment section. Former welterweight champion Robbie Lawler talks about being on the prelims. Robbie Lawler is a legend, a former world champion, and one of the most exciting fighters to have ever stepped foot in the cage. While he's preparing for an upcoming fight against Bryan Barberena at UFC 276 on July 2nd, some fans will be surprised to know that Lawler will be on the prelims for this card. For years, Lawler entertained fans with his gritty style, his striking prowess, and his knockout power. But since losing the welterweight title to Tyron Woodley back in 2016, he's gone 2-4, including a streak of 4 straight losses. He did get back to his winning ways with a victory over Nick Diaz last September. However, for this next fight on July 2nd, the former 2-time UFC Fighter of the Year, Lawler, will be battling out in the prelims. However, Lawler seems pretty chill about the whole thing, and this is what he stated in a recent interview with MMA Junkie about being on the prelims for this card.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, I was surprised. I was like, okay, whatever, but I get to get out of there earlier, which is nice. I wish they'd just put me first.
Right.
Start the show and then get out and hang out. Maybe fly home.
Lawler is well known among fight fans who've been watching for several years. He's a good dude who has knockout power in his fists, so his fights always bring the excitement. His opponent on July 2nd will be Bryan Barberena, who is on a 2-fight winning streak and most recently beat Matt Brown by a split decision this past March. What do you think about Lawler's reaction of being put on the prelims? Thanks so much for joining us today. What do you make of what's going on in the fight world? Make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel to stay up to date on all of the latest news from the MMA Zone. See you next time.